8363. That's 1-800-464-8363.
The woman who claims her mother's boyfriend kidnapped her when she was just 15 years old and held her captive for a decade says she felt alone and helpless. But the suspect's lawyer says she's lying about the whole thing. Remember, the woman says this man drugged her when he took her, that he raped her, forced her to marry him, and forced her to have his child. Prosecutors say he convinced her that nobody was looking for her. Now the woman, age 25, says she knows that is not true.
I was very afraid about everything because I was alone. I think I was alone, but I never wasn't. My family was with me.
The man's attorney says there was no kidnapping and that the two were breaking up. He says the woman is simply trying to get back at his client.
He treated her like a queen. He was devoted to her. He did what she wanted. She was happy. She had her own car. She had her own job. He never hit her. Nobody ever saw him hit her. Nobody ever told her that she has to go somewhere or she has to do something.
If convicted, the suspect faces up to 19 years in prison. Let's bring it to a lawyer. Dan Schorr is a former prosecutor and with us now. It was a little more than a year ago that we saw the Ariel Castro situation in Ohio. That was pretty obvious. I mean, shackled to the walls, that kind of treatment. That's what those women endured. This one, not so clear.
Right. In that case, the three women involved were physically restrained for a decade. Here, she had freedom of movement. She was able to talk to people. She was able to have a Facebook page. She was able to have employment. However, she was taken, or at least went with this individual, when she was 15. So she was under the age of consent. She says she was drugged and woke up in a garage. But even if she went willingly, as the defendant alleges, she was still underage. So there's serious crimes from that.
But his lawyer says, look, you know, the guy comes from a different culture. There are different norms in other countries outside the United States.
I've actually had cases like that as a sex crimes prosecutor where defendants have had sex with underage girls and said, well, in my country it's acceptable and that's what I'm basing my decisions on. However, that does not work under American law. Under American law, the age of consent is the age of consent. In California, it's 18. She was 15 when she went with him originally. So he committed rape if he had sex with her at that point.
But everybody acknowledges that he worked hard, worked a couple of jobs, gave her a fair amount of, you know, even she said that he gave me whatever I needed, bought her a new minivan and that kind of thing. If he's buying her minivans and if she has access to the internet, how can it be captivity?
There's a lot of questions about why she didn't get help, and it's interesting that the criminal charges right now all relate to 2004 when she was first taken, when she was underage. So far, they haven't filed charges for the later period, the recent period, maybe because it's hard to prove because she did have access to the outside world, but she still has those actions when she was 15 to 18 where she was underage, and that's what the charges are based on.
Dan, stand by. We'll continue to watch that case. Breaking news, a judge has ruled that a convicted serial rapist must be released to live in Los Angeles County community. Christopher Evans Hubbard reportedly has acknowledged raping and assaulting about 40 women between 1971 and 1982. Investigators reportedly say that number is actually closer to 100 women. Folks in the community have protested his release, so the question is, where will he go? Let's go back to Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor who worked a lot of sex crimes cases. So this guy had served his time and was being held in a mental facility?
Right. He was released from prison in 1996. His crimes were with multiple women, ended around 1982. Then he was incarcerated in a psychiatric facility, so not a prison until now, and he's going to be released into the community. It's a very difficult situation when you have someone who's a convicted serial rapist. They've served their time in prison. The psychiatric facility doesn't think they belong there anymore, but what do you do with them? Where do they live? You're still worried about them being a threat to the community.
He's going to have to wear the GPS bracelet that monitors his whereabouts 24 hours a day. I mean, as a former prosecutor, are you satisfied with that kind of thing?
It's comforting that he's going to be watched, but it's still disconcerting that someone who is a violent, convicted rapist is going to be in the community. It's good that the community has been notified. They were speaking out. One of the local assemblymen was trying to organize people in the community to spread the word about the fact that he's moving there. That's important so people are aware that he's around and they can protect their kids, but it's never totally assuring that someone with a violent past is going to be in the community.
It can also be a problem for, the suspect, for the newly released himself. I mean, his face is going to be very public, and there are a lot of people out there who don't want that kind of person walking their streets.
And that's the two sides of the story. One is protecting the community, and the other side is a convicted criminal who served his time. Where does he go to try to rebuild his life? Some will say that his crimes are so egregious that it doesn't matter, but then others will say he served his time. He should be able to live somewhere. It's a tough situation.
Former prosecutor Dan Schorr, thanks.
Thank you.
A jury in Las Vegas has convicted a former Cirque du Soleil dancer of second-degree murder for choking to death his ex-girlfriend, cutting her up, and hiding her body